So I stopped this virtual machine so that I can stop the charges. Virtual machines are charged by the minute, and if your virtual machine is not running, then that means you're not going to get charged for the compute element of that. Now you are still charged for storage. So if I did have any external disks or the temporary disks relating to this, that I'm going to still be charged for that, but it's a relatively small charge compared to the per second charge or the per hour charge for running a virtual machine. So let's go to the dashboard. First off, my dashboard is going to look different than yours. I've customized this a little bit. The colors are different. I've got some tiles on here that you might not have. I'm not going to get into customizing your dashboard right now, but just keep in mind that you can create multiple different dashboards, and it's going to basically be different for you and for me and for everyone else. You can change the colors, you can change how these tiles look, etc. Now on the left is your Azure portal menu. It goes from everything from create a resource. You've got both a home screen and a dashboard. A home screen is relatively new. It actually just contains some shortcuts to virtual machines and some other hot points within Azure. Dashboard, like I said, is the customizable element. All services is going to be a big thing. You're going to want to go in there lots of times looking for things that you know you have running, but you don't necessarily want to dig into all resources and stuff like that. The rest of this is customizable. You'll see it says favorites, and so I can put here whatever I want, the most common resources that I go to within my Azure account. For now, we're going to go into the create a resource. Now, using this double arrow, I can minimize that to free up some space. We want to create a compute resource. Now, under this menu, we get several featured compute resources, including Windows, Red Hat, Ubuntu, and some other types of virtual machines that even have other additional software installed on top of it. I'm going to choose the Windows Server to start. Okay, we'll talk about Linux because that's an important part of this exam as well. Now there's this wizard. It is a 6-tab wizard that takes you through creating of a virtual machine. The first decision you have to make is your subscription. I only have one subscription, and maybe you only have one subscription. Mine is the pay-as-you-go plan, which means I get charged for all the resources I create. You might have the free account. We talked about creating an Azure account. So you might say free plan here, or you might have an enterprise account where your company is paying for it, and there might be an enterprise account here. Or you might even have an MSDN subscription, and you get certain credits based on your MSDN, and so depending on your license, you're going to have a different thing here. All resources, all computing resources, have to live inside a resource group. A resource group is like a folder structure that you can organize all the resources in your account. When you're getting into Microsoft Azure and you're starting to create resources, even in a production setting, you're going to quickly have hundreds of running resources, including the resource groups themselves, virtual networks, and IP addresses. Everything that you do within Azure pretty much creates you a resource, not just the computes. And so you're going to want to organize that into like a folder structure. So this resource group is very much like subfolders on your computer. I tend to create a new resource group every time I have a project that I'm starting up. I want to organize all the resources into the same group. This makes it very easy to view them. It's also very easy to see the charges that are all related to each other because resource groups, you can break the cost structure down to that level. The security becomes easier because you can break security settings down to the resource group level. And it's easy to delete them and clean them up. So once we're done with this example, I can go through, delete this resource group, and it will delete all the resources that were created. So you give your resource group a name. There's this Create New button. You click it, you give it a name. I'm going to put this into my existing resource group called AZ203 New VM. Now the virtual machine itself needs a name. Okay, so we're creating a VM, and this name needs to be unique for the resource group. Now I already have a virtual machine called this. We just looked at it. So it says the virtual machine name must be unique to the current resource group. So I'm going to actually say the number 2. So this virtual machine is unique within this resource group. The region. Now there are something like 50 plus regions of the world that you can deploy your VMs into. everything from Australia, South America, Canada. US has many regions. Europe is rapidly expanding, and Asia as well. There's China. What you might say, well, I don't see 50 regions in this list. Well, that's because a lot of those regions are restricted. So for instance, China would not be in here because you need to have a separate agreement with another company besides Microsoft that's based out of China to run your virtual machine inside of China. The government resources are not going to be in here. So government regions, Department of Defense regions, those are also off limits. So Microsoft is creating regions specifically for government organizations. If you're not part of that, then you're not going to see it. So let's choose Central US. It's a good enough place to create your resources. The only thing this really impacts is that not every region has every instance type. So let's say there's a brand new announced instance that has 128 CPUs and 1,024 terabytes of memory and all this great stuff. It might only be released in 2 or 3 regions the first time that it comes out. It takes a while for all features to get deployed to all regions. So the region does impact your choice of virtual machines. Now we haven't talked about availability yet, but basically you can set up your servers to be highly available, and that would be within this. I'm going to skip this for now, but we'll come back to it. Choosing what image to choose. So we're creating a virtual machine. We have, like we said earlier, Windows and Linux options. Okay, you cannot create a virtual machine that does not have any operating system. That is not possible. It has to be, there's currently 9 items on this list. It has to be one of these 9 items to start within this interface. When you're using PowerShell and CLI, you've got other options, and then you can also have custom images where you create your perfect image with all your tools installed, create that as an image, and then you would use a PowerShell script to deploy that. But we're just talking about the portal at this second. So we got Windows Server 2008, 2012, and 2016 as options, and Windows 10. I'm going to choose Windows Server 2016 because I don't have a reason to choose them other. Now you can see that there's Browse All. So this list is the quick pick list, and we can actually get to see other images from the Browse All. Now, basically the first really major decision you have to make is the virtual machine size. Now by default, it's always recommending this DS1 to me. Now in the last video we were looking at the B1MS, which was around $16 a month for a virtual machine. This DS1 is more expensive. So I'm going to say change size, and we can see the one that they're recommending is $119 a month Canadian. And like I said, the B1MS, this is 28 Canadian, it's quoting me here. So we can go through based on our needs and choose from dozens and dozens of virtual machine types. So let's say you want to see a virtual machine that either is medium, let's make it a large type. Okay, so now we can see there's only 2 of them that are being offered to me. Now I have a restriction on my account, and most people would have a restriction the first time you created an account, in that you have a limit, I believe, of 10 CPUs unless you ask Microsoft to extend that. So this is for your own protection. I don't want to accidentally create a $6,000 a month virtual machine. So before you ask Microsoft to upgrade your number of CPUs, you may want to realize the consequences of this action. Okay, so this particular one, I don't have the limit on my account that would support that. So I'm going to remove that, and we're going to create the B1MS for testing purposes. Again, it's 1 CPU, 2 gigabytes of RAM. Supports a maximum of 2 data disks. It comes with 0 by default, and you would have to add 1 or 2 for additional charge if you want. Those data disks are basically 800 operations per second. So it's because it's the B1MS, type of account, that gives you a little bit faster I/O operations and more per second. If you go to the cheaper B1S option, you only get 400 operations per second. The disk is a bit slower. Okay, so we're going to choose B1MS. Now, you do need to give it a user ID and password. Now, because this is a Windows server, this user ID and password is what you're going to use to log into RDP, and is what you're going to use to log into Windows. So this is basically an admin account on this computer that you can log in remotely. So I filled out a user ID and a password. We're going to pause this and come back in the next video and continue on with creating a virtual machine.